Okay. All right. Now we're live. Now we're recording. This is the Evidence Based Triathlete. Ted and I talk about triathlon on a Friday night, 6 o'clock.
Yep, every Friday. I don't know how many we've done in a row now, but we've nailed actually Friday right around 6 o'clock. But we're doing pretty good with this.
Yeah.
It's consistent. That's for sure.
Well, and we were just sort of having fun talking about my hair has gotten longer and your mustache has gotten fuller.
Yeah, it just keeps getting thicker and thicker. You know, you're probably thinking the same as me. It's like, man, obviously this is not going to be good to race with.
Yeah.
But you know, until there's a race, there's no reason for you to cut your hair or me to trim my mustache.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think the first race I'll go back to short hair, but
yeah, a first race, this sucker's coming off. The one nice thing is it's getting so thick that if a bug comes in, it's actually like filtered on the bike.
That's great. Well, you had a pretty fantastic ride I just saw on Strava.
Yeah, it was a good ride today. I on a whim, I decided to drive out to Death Valley today, and we talked about it a long time ago, like planning routes out and looking for like ways to find routes. And that PJAM cycling website that we talked about before, they have 4 or 5 of the top climbs in California are in Death Valley. And so I decided to take the one that they thought was the best climb. And I drove out and did that today. So that was pretty good. Barely made it back in time to have a shower and jump on our talk. But yeah, it was good. No traffic out there at all. When I got to Furnace Creek, it was like 11:30 in the morning and it was 67 degrees. I think it got into the 70s for sure. So that was nice. And, just a light breeze, nothing too rough. And then did the climb and it was spectacular. I have to say, like, if people from the Las Vegas Tri Club in particular are interested, that's a good place to go even for a day trip and go for a ride. I equated it to kind of the old days of going skiing. Wake up early, pack up your stuff, get to where you're going to go, do your day's worth of skiing and then come home. And really from my house to get to where I started was like an hour and 40 minutes.
Okay.
And I started at Death Valley Junction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's where the road starts to get really good.
No, and soon we can we can take the trailer out there and.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about even staying over, but because of COVID, the one place that's open was sold out.
No.
The other place that is closed, and all of the campgrounds are closed right now. And so that was, good probably for traffic. And also Friday, it's probably a better day.
So, what was the attraction of doing that this time of year?
Well, I think it's the time of year to do it. It's so hot there. You really have a window of time where you could go. And then honestly, if it wouldn't have been a warm day, like it was supposed to be, like 70, I probably wouldn't have considered it either. And not much wind, it was just, honestly, I didn't even decide till like 2 days ago. I was like,
cool.
The weather looks good.
Yeah.
I'm almost ready for school to start.
Yeah.
No, I still have to build out one class, but I'm feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good.
I was actually busy doing that today. So if students are listening, realize that I procrastinate too and getting everything ready. So
I got 2 out of my 3 done.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be windy. Was it is it Sunday it's supposed to be windy or Monday?
Oh, I don't know.
One of the days this weekend was supposed to be windy. So on the windy day, I'll build out that class and get that all finished.
Well, my class this semester is Biomechanics of Endurance Performance. So they are going to be listening to quite a few of our Evidence-Based Triathlete podcasts. So
you're double dipping.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm the class that I'm teaching 2 classes this semester. I'm teaching a sports pharmacology class, which we can absolutely talk about drugs.
Yep.
And then I'm also teaching kind of an advanced rehabilitation class. And so we absolutely can talk about that as well. I came across this really interesting study that we'll bring up all about tendon health. that I want to bring up in a future podcast. But today we're going to talk more about power.
Yeah, I want to, I quickly went to when you told me you did that ride, of course I went to check it out on Strava. And what I love about Strava is one, it's a community of, it's Facebook for endurance athletes is what I say. And it's sort of fun to see what each other are doing and encourage each other and check out the data too, because Strava has some good data.
Yeah, you can get a lot of data off of it for sure. For sure.
So let's talk through your ride, because I think I think that'd be fun to put the context of talking about power meters into that ride. Or do you want to start by talking about the bigger picture of why?
No, we could talk about the ride. So, when I train, and today was training, I look at training in a couple different ways. I look at training with a purpose, and then I look at almost like a ride like today, where it wasn't for training, it was for enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, because we haven't been racing, I've kind of set up some things, like when I was in Tucson last month, and did Mount Lemmon several times, right? Those weren't necessarily all training rides. Some were just to like get out and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And today was one of those days too. So, I was looking at my power, but I wasn't trying to say, okay, I need to do this amount of watts for this amount of time. Yeah. And and realistically, I think we all have to do that from time to time. Just go out and ride and enjoy the fact, like I'm enjoying the fact that I'm in pretty good shape right now.
Yeah.
Right. Like
good shape. Yeah.
The ride today was 87 miles with almost 8,000 feet of climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I did in 5 hours.
That's awesome.
And but I'm fit right now, and it feels good just to go out and ride and not think about, what's the training impact of today. Just go out and do. Mm-hmm. And so the plan as far as power was to basically concentrate on the one climb. So there was a climb from basically below sea level, starts at like 100. I think I started at 180 feet below sea level, which is super cool to start a climb below sea level.
Yeah. And
then it goes up to, I don't even know what the top was, 5,500 feet over like 26 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And so then my goal on that was to keep above 240 watts.
Okay.
For the entire time. I didn't like put it into any like best bike split or anything. I kind of thought it would be around 2 hours ish. But I was like, I just want to keep that power over 240 watts. And it's more of a personal challenge for me to hold that wattage for that amount of time. And I was able to do it. I think I ended up with 243 watts or 242 watts or something like that. But that kind of goes back to like having a power meter, and you can set these little goals for yourself. Like, I want to do this for this. And that power meter is just sitting there, and you're looking at the road, you're looking at your power meter, like, okay, well, I'm at 250. Okay. I'm feeling okay. Oh man, I dropped down to 230 something. Oh, but got to put a little bit more power in. Oh. And it kind of keeps you honest with yourself. Because, as the ride goes on and as time goes on, you get more and more fatigued. Right. And it becomes harder mentally to continue to do that. And we'll talk about power duration curves in a little bit, but ultimately everybody fatigues right, with time. And one of the things we can do with training is try and extend the time till we fatigue, or mitigate the percentage of fatigue. And by doing a ride like today, like in the back of my mind, like I said, it was for fun, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that, if I can ride that power for 2 hours, like that's kind of looking like a 70.3 ride for me.
Yeah. Right.
And so, this kind of gives me confidence too. So like, I got a 70.3, hopefully coming up in the spring sometime. Mm-hmm. Could I do 240 watts for the average power for that? And if I could, I've never done that in a 70.3 before. Right. That would be really awesome. Mm-hmm. But without that kind of data, how would I know? Like, where, kind of comparing, power is great because you can, it's a direct measure, like we talked about last week, and you can compare like this 2 hours or 2.5 hours in this 70.3 to this 2.5 hours in this 70.3, and see like, am I improving, or am I getting worse? Or, I think it's a really honest metric.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel on that.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I mean, that's the advantage of power meter, is that it is a mechanical measuring device, and it measures force and how fast that force is being applied. Torque and angular velocity, but close enough. And that is, it's a very objective measure. And what we've talked about before is that power, in essence, is telling you your physiology at the same time. It's telling you how fast you're transforming really chemical energy to mechanical energy. Now, there's a little bit of wiggle room in there because, especially if you start climbing, there's another type of energy that you have that gets converted to moving you forward, and that's potential energy. And so, like, if you're climbing up out of your pedals, your power will be different. Sorry, your power will be your power.
Yes.
But it may not be telling you your physiology, because now you're transforming potential energy, mechanical energy, to kinetic energy, or energy of movement. And the potential energy is basically how high you are and how much you weigh. Pushing down on the pedals, that's actually would create power, but that has nothing to do with physiology. Yeah. And so that's the only sort of trick with the power meter, is to recognize when you're converting mechanical energy to mechanical energy versus chemical energy to chemical energy. Now, remember when we did those, we were exploring doing those fitness tests in the lab. And one of the instructions from one of the programs we were looking at said you got to stay in your seat.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why you got to stay in your seat, because once you come out of your seat, now you're using mechanical energy versus chemical energy to move the pedal, which is great. And that's why you may get out of your saddle at times, because now you're able to generate power, and it's not a physiological cost. Now you're taking advantage of standing on the pedals.
Yeah, John, it's interesting though, because in some way it's more of a physiologic cost though, because now you're bringing more of your body in, right? So you'll notice that your power goes up when you stand up, but also your heart rate increases.
Right.
But,
and
so it is an increased physiologic cost.
No, you're right, because actually part of that is now it becomes a weight bearing exercise, and so your physiology does change.
Yeah.
But there's still when I talk about power as being converting chemical energy or energy from one form to another, ideally it's from physiological test, it's chemical energy to mechanical energy.
Yeah.
But when you stand on your pedals, it's still chemical to mechanical plus mechanical to mechanical. Yep. And so you're getting a little bit of a different flavor of power. Yeah. But you're right, it's weight bearing, and that is more demanding.
Well, and you're using your upper body more. Like when I'm in the saddle and I'm seated climbing or seated in any way, one of the things I try and do is try and keep my upper body still.
Yeah.
Like I don't want extra movement, because that's extra physiologic cost.
That's right. No,
right.
Right.
And we talked about this last week about like the smoothness of pedaling, and over time developing pedaling efficiency. And one of the ways to do that is to keep still. Right. But when you stand up and you do a big climb, say you do 2 minutes standing or 3 minutes standing, now you are entering into in my opinion, quite a different physiologic state. Yeah. You're right. You're weight bearing on the pedals, and you're definitely using more core muscle, I think, and there's a lot more wasted energy too.
Yeah,
it's not as efficient, and then therefore your heart rate ends up going up.
Yeah, no, and sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm not implying it's easy.
No, I'm not. No, I don't. I wasn't getting that application at all. I don't, because I think we both agree it's not easier.
Going up hills is hard.
But I would say it's easier if you've been seated for like 20 minutes, and a little kicker comes and you stand up. It actually is easier, because now you've changed muscle fibers. that you're using, and you've changed joint angles.
No,
And
that's right.
so the muscle fibers that are potentially fatigued, and the muscles that are fatigued might get a little rest.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talk about course recon. We talk about ideal courses. That's partly why the best course for me is a rolling hill course, as opposed to sustained climb courses, because I'm a little heavier.
Yep.
And so, that when you start going uphill, you get a resistance force based upon how heavy everything is. And the more weight that you're carrying up the hill, obviously the harder it is. And so that's, that's why we spend a lot of money on light gear. Or if how many water bottles were you carrying, or how much weight were you carrying on that ride today?
You want to know the best part? I
What?
underestimated my water need.
Ah,
I was like, okay, I had 2 bottles when I started the climb, and I'm like, okay, 2 hours, 1 bottle per hour. That's gonna be
okay.
about right. It's not that hot.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually hid a bottle for my way home.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I was just the way the course set up, I could hide a bottle.
Okay.
And I got to the top of the climb, and honestly, I was getting a little bit of a tailwind, especially in the last 20 or 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a tailwind up a little I don't know what you call it, valley.
Mm-hmm.
So it got really hot, and I was drinking, and I got to, a lot. And then the final quarter mile is 15%. It's steep and hard.
Yep.
And I got to the top, and it was like 70 degrees up there, and I was out of water. And fortunately, the goodness of people, there were some other people at the top, not cyclists. Well, they were cyclists, and the guy's like, "Oh my gosh, we were watching you climb up that last bit. You did so good. You must need some water." I'm like, "Actually, I do." And he had a couple gallon jugs, and he's like,
Oh,
"You're gonna
nice.
fill up your water bottles." And I was just like, "Oh, thank you so much," because I was a half hour to go down to where I hid my water bottle.
Oh.
So yeah, it was good that yeah. But then again, I saved the weight.
Yeah.
Right? He carried the water up for me.
Yeah. There you go. That's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
All right. So, how else so you're on this ride, you were watching power, but you weren't necessarily training for power.
Right. Because the once again, the goal today was to do 240 watts up that climb.
Okay.
But like, I don't have that necessarily in my power. Like my plan, as far as mostly polarized training,
Yep.
that's gray zone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or people, depending on what you look at, some people call that sweet spot training.
Yeah.
Right. And I've done a lot of gray zone sweet spot training over this last year, because we're not racing, and
Yep.
those are the enjoyable rides for me, are more that. But I would, in a training session, if I had something planned, I would do, especially the polarized model, I would do zone 1, zone 2 power.
Mm-hmm.
And, let's 80% of my training, I'd like to be in that range. So below 210 watts for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, for example, on Thursday, I did a ride on the trainer, and I set it at 180 watts for 2 hours.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And just that's zone 1.5 for me.
Mm-hmm.
And or in the polarized model, that's right in the middle of zone 1. Mm-hmm. And just put it on erg mode and watched a few YouTube videos. Oh. And the 2 hours just goes away. And my heart rate was like 120 beats a minute. Perfect. Oh. That's right where I want to be. So I'm using the power to do exactly what I want. Okay. Then if I want to do the other side of the polarized training, where I'm going all out, then there is the length of your intervals, because that's when I'm going all out, it's interval training, right? Mm-hmm. The length of your interval will be determined based off of your power duration curve, which once again we're going to talk about. But there'll be definite power targets depending on what I want to do. So we talked about FTP last week. If I want to increase FTP, the research says that my interval should be longer, 20, 30, 40 minutes in general,
Mm-hmm.
just below FTP. So like, I think it's 87 to 95% of FTP.
Yeah.
That will push FTP up.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to do something that is functional reserve capacity, which is working above my FTP, then I need to target, 105 to 110%, let's say, of FTP. If I want to get VO2 work in, which from time to time I do want to do, my intervals will be shorter and even harder, but they're all based off of math and knowing yourself and testing yourself, so you know where to train.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most good coaches out there that are prescribing training, hopefully they're using models like this to prescribe the training. It's not just, well, I'm feeling like you should do this, I'm feeling like you should do this. There's actually there's methods and research methods to obviously to do these things. And like what's the best interval length, what's the proper rest time, and those things are all, I mean, there's a lot of research in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is why athletes are, can get an advantage by having a coach who understands this, because, listening to you talk, I mean, you are so well read on this area, and you have a lot of practical experience as well. And you have your, training in the clinical world.
Yeah.
You combine all those things. That's pretty powerful. Well, and I think that's what, to have someone just sort of take this up, that's a little hard. That's a big ask. But I think what we can do tonight is talk about some things that they may want to talk to a coach about. Or
yeah, like if you're
maybe
interviewing a coach, right?
That's right. If you're interviewing a coach, or if a coach is prescribing something, or if you have a training program that is prescribing something on power, to try to dive a little deeper into some of the details and that are behind why you'd want to ride a particular power or do a certain interval. So let's talk power curve.
Yeah, let's talk power curve. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, you've disabled me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I gotta change that in the setting when I make a meeting. There's got to be a default that
There has to
sharing
be
is
a
okay.
default for that.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not letting me share. The one program I want to share, it won't let me.
Which program?
WKO.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can bring up while you do that, why don't I bring up my Strava power curve?
I can just share the whole screen.
Let me know when you're ready. All right, so here is a power curve. We have power on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. Now, this time is not a continuous time. This is, for example, a 20-minute ride. And this is the power based upon all the data I've uploaded to Strava in the last 6 weeks, how much power I typically generate for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And
now, I can tell you, John, there's some bad data here.
Oh, yeah? Oh, good. Yeah.
Because you didn't hit 2,400 watts for.
Oh, yeah. You know what?
For 2
my
seconds.
Battery died. And I think when my battery was dying, I should go and delete that ride, actually.
Because when I first look at your power duration curve here, I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a horrible power duration curve. But it's getting messed up because of that. So, and this is actually a good lesson for people, is especially in Strava, it's really nice because it tells you which ride that happened in.
Yeah. And
then you can go in and delete.
All right, so let me go back to 2018. Oh yeah, see, look at that. This is the 2019. Here's the this is the 2018 data.
So you can actually on the left hand thing where it says last 6 weeks on the top center, just put none on that one. There you go. There's your 2018 power curve.
All right. All right, so I'll
And
keep.
you fall apart at 7.5 hours. I mean, I don't know what goes on
I certainly do.
with you at 7.5 hours.
That's funny how that. I don't
So,
know.
so you want to know what's interesting is then when you get past that, you didn't turn on that ride. You didn't turn your power. You didn't turn something off.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and why I love looking at these, John, is because if you look at it, obviously 7.5 hours, or even probably 6.5, where you have that dip at 6.5. I assume that was an Ironman.
It could have been, yeah.
Right? Like if you go just a little bit left. Okay, so July 29th, 2018.
That could be Lake Placid.
Probably was.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you go to your one before where you have that drop off at 40 or at 50 minutes.
Over here. Yeah.
If you go back, yeah. So May 19th, 2018, I almost can guarantee that was a race.
That could have been
55 minutes. I'm going to say that was Kokopelli or St. George Triathlon, because that's the only one that's about that
probably
distance.
an Olympic. Yeah, 240 is what I could hold, and not right now, but 240 I could hold for an Olympic. And then
that was a sprint race.
That's a sprint.
Right. So it's really interesting. And here's the Strava's curve is nice, but there's not a smoothing to it.
Mm-hmm.
Where some of the other programs will have a smoothing, because basically we know that for example, at 48 minutes
mm-hmm.
on your power hydration curve, that's not your real 48-minute power.
Right. That's right.
Because if you had a race that was 48 minutes long, it would have continued.
So let's just complete the explanation of this curve. Is that, and that's what you're speaking to, is this time is the time I'm trying to go up without moving my cursor. I guess I could do it, but it's up here.
Yep.
That's showing how much power and what date that occurred at. So this time on this axis is not continuous. This is not the power.
Right. And that's the tricky part is
over time. These are data. Each one of these is a data point, as opposed to continuous time down here. And so over here, this would be a data point. This is probably riding to work and sprinting from one lake to another, something like that.
And that's your 3-second power, right? And this is something that's pretty important to know is, in general, for long course triathletes, that means nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it helps build the model.
I will never hit 952 watts during a race, during an Ironman.
No.
But when I'm taking off from a stoplight and I want to sprint to the next one, okay, maybe then I can get up. I can get up over 1,000 watts for when I'm commuting and doing that type of workout. So
so this is a good example of this. And then they're calculating your year's estimated FTP at 298. And if you go to 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Oh, sorry. Yep.
And it's a little higher. Normally at 20 minutes, it's pretty close. I actually think they're estimating you a little high.
Mm-hmm.
Because at 298, you're at 15 minutes.
Yeah. 299. Yeah. Yeah.
220. Really, it should be like closer to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But they build it off of, like, Strava builds that number off of a 20-minute. You have to go hard for 20 minutes, basically.
Yeah.
That's how they build that.
2018 was a pretty good year, but it is interesting how, if I go, there's 2019.
283.
Gone down a little bit. And then 2020, which was not a great training year, went down even more. And now my 2021, I'm starting to go in the upward trajectory now. So
I even say you have a data error in that one too, because you're still over 2,200 watts. And
it's from up here.
Yeah. So if you want, go in and and then you don't do it obviously right now. You can go in and erase those ones, but.
Mm-hmm. I like those. I want credit.
Yeah, we all want to have 2,200 watts of power, but none of us really do.
Yeah, that's a lot of power. That's a lot of light bulbs.
Exactly.
All right, do you have yours up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I figured it out. Now it's too.
All right, that was comic relief. Now we'll get to.
So this is mine for the last 90 days.
Yeah.
We can do.
And this software, this is WKO. Yep, I see it.
This is WKO.
Mhm.
So this is my last year
Okay.
of training. So this is a little bit different view than yours, because they're using smoothing
Okay.
on the red line. So the red line is my power duration curve. So if I just scroll over that, that's just my power duration curve, but it's been smoothed. And then this is the real kind of it's actually modeled data, but it's pretty close. So one of the things you can look at in this is looking at the difference between the smooth and this. So these dips,
Yep.
these are areas that I would like, you should probably be targeting in your training. So the areas below, basically it's called the areas below the curve. It's an area you want to potentially train if you want to be an all well-rounded cyclist.
Yep.
Right. But once again, I don't really care too much about, for example, 20-second power or a minute 6 power. I'm concerned with down in here, right?
Yep.
Like, because mostly for 70.3 racing, I want to know, like, where am I at 230? And because I didn't 70.3 race in the last 365 days, this number is lower than it normally would be down in here. Oh, actually, if we do, I've never done this the last 3 years. We'll see what ends up coming, because I think it'll be elongated even further because I would have had races that were on that distance.
So over 3 years, same power meter?
Same power meters.
Oh.
Well, on my racing bike.
And
we go to most of mine are like 220. So at 220, 225, 226 watts.
All right, hold on. I'm trying to get orientated here. Where's your
So top left, you can actually see as I scroll.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see. So the PD curve and the MMP in the top left. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And the MMP is modeled maximum power.
Okay. And so PD is
just the power duration curve that's been smoothed. Now, the thing I really like about WKO, and I'm just learning, I've only been using it for like 3 weeks. I'm learning a lot. But this view here to me is awesome for teaching people. Okay. And the contribution of aerobic versus anaerobic. Yep. So it looks kind of confusing to begin with, but we can still see my power duration curve. If I just click on that, there's my power duration curve. But what we can do here is we can look at, this is the anaerobic contribution, right? So for example, at any given time, if I go up from 3 minutes, we can see, and we really look at it. And when I get to about 15 minutes, I don't have much of the powers coming from anaerobic. Like on the percentage wise, it's like 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
Right? And then this is the aerobic.
Okay.
And why I love this is, you see that flat line that goes across?
Yeah.
So really what that is maximum lactate steady state. Right?
At 300 watts?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, that's the last 1,095 days. But yeah, that's the model.
Yeah. So that's between 3 and almost 20, well, maybe.
Well, it's going out to like 52 minutes.
Okay, yeah, because that scale, yeah, okay.
Right. So, but if you look at that and you look at the that flatness, what I want to do is continue to take that flatness and make it wider. Right. And bring that to the right. The further I get that to the right, the more stamina I have, or basically, or longer time to exhaustion. And to me, this is a really interesting thing, just to see the contribution. Now, if I add them all together again, you can actually see that if you take the blue line, which is anaerobic, the green line, which is aerobic, and you add them together, you get the red line.
Okay.
Right. And these are things that can be manipulated with training. So if I do a lot of aerobic based training, I will have more contribution on the aerobic side.
Okay. So aerobic based training based on this is anything below 300 watts?
No. No, because my FTP is 300 let's say 310 watts on this view. So that's LT2 basically.
Okay.
So lactate threshold 2. I would say it would be more like lactate threshold 1, which would be there's we can measure it with lactate, but if we just do a mathematical model, maybe 210 watts or below.
Okay.
The other thing is that, we're always talking to people about, or I'm always talking to people about the importance in triathlon of training aerobically. And when we start to look, let's say we're going to do an Olympic race. So I go to 1 hour, let's say that's the time I would love to do a 40K in an Olympic race.
Yep.
What's the percentage of blue to green? Right? There's basically no blue. It's all green. Okay. And that's 1 hour of being on the bike. Now that doesn't count the half-hour swim and the 40-minute run. Right. So just thinking about it, at 2 hours and 10 minutes, I know this is just bike data, but at 210 minutes, let's say, or 2 hours and 10 minutes, it's all
aerobic.
It's all aerobic.
Yeah.
So why then do we spend so much time, or people spend so much time worrying about the anaerobic side? Right. I agree. We have to put some effort into that, right? Because the way the way our body works, and the contribution of both is important. And even at, like, for example, at 15 minutes, we still are having contribution from the anaerobic side. But the focus, and why in my opinion, why the polarized training works so well is it really deals with the green, right? The intervals are dealing with the blue. And so, I don't know. In general, now longer intervals become more aerobic. So if I do a 15-minute interval, for example, right, and we can actually look at this. If I do a 15-minute interval at threshold, 310 watts, I'm still doing a lot of aerobic. Right? But these short, like a 10-second interval is probably not doing a whole lot for me aerobically. Right. So, and once again, there's a lot of thought that goes into this, and this is just my opinion on it. And don't get me wrong, like, I do intervals, and I even do some short ones, but I do micro intervals, which are, we can get into intervals another time, but basically there's very, very little rest in between them, and it ends up being aerobic, or more aerobic. But anyways, I just think it's important to see what contributes to the system, right? And I don't think that people necessarily appreciate it as much as until you see it with something like this.
No, this is super interesting. I'm loving this chart as well, because I mean you've got that horizontal line there, that's your FTP, and
it's modeled off of that flat,
Yep. Okay. And so obviously if you raise that up, that'll push your red line up, which is the amount of power that you can generate for all those durations, which will ultimately mean you're going to go faster.
Okay, but I love this talk, because what if we pushed where I am right now, pushed it this way?
Yeah.
Right? Because if I push it this way, then the red line will also go up. So this is in my opinion the secret sauce to training.
Well, that's to the left of that is a sprint race, and to the right of that is something longer than a sprint.
And I want to do longer.
That's right.
So it depends on the time of year and where we're at, but like, I'm promising I'm going to take a little bit of a break coming up as school starts. But when I get back from my little break, my next 8 weeks is going to be concentrating on taking this way.
Okay.
Right. Then as I get into closer to the races I want to do, then I'm going to bring it this way. Okay. Right. And so this is like base, the term base building. The way I look at this is my base, right? This is flat line. I want to build it out this way.
Okay.
Right. And then, so it's base, and then like race prep and race building is building this way to have a higher FTP.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, you know, and I believe like you can walk and chew gum.
Mm-hmm.
The research actually kind of shows that if you model yourself properly and do these things in the right time, that you have almost like a bigger bang for your buck. So basically we're periodizing the lengthening first, and then periodizing increasing second. That's how I'm going to approach it. Now, if we go back to this is all needs to be done with a power meter.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
The one other thing I want to show you is this is actually another cool thing of WKO. It actually tells you based off of your physiology, when you do test yourself or you do set up intervals, it kind of gives you the secret sauce. So for me, like to do like a long test for like a purely aerobic test, I got to kind of look at a 37-minute test. So my medium duration test, my short duration test, and this also helps me build out intervals based off of my physiology. This gets a little bit in depth, but this is that same power duration curve, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, this is normal. It's normalized, but basically it's the points below the curve that I want to kind of target if I wanted to become the level cyclist. Right. Which I don't necessarily like. I'm not really trying to become a level cyclist. Like that's a good at sprinting, good at medium distance, and good at long distance. Yeah. Cool stuff, huh?
It's a lot of stuff. It's really,
and I don't suggest that people go out and buy the WKO software until like you really understand the physiology behind this. And honestly, there's I have years and years and years of utilizing physiology and, taking physiology courses, and I'm still, learning. And so nothing against the WKO software. It's awesome. And it's, it's a good tool, but you really have to kind of know what you're getting into. Yeah.
Well, and I love how you're linking the power back to physiology, and that's how we started this conversation. That's what power is telling you.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful program to start trying to tease out which energy system your body's using, because you do have different ways to convert chemical energy to mechanical energy, aerobically and anaerobically.
Yeah, and you can even in that like overlay heart rate over time, and heart rate drift and cardiac drift and all. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. So then you tie the physiology back in as well, right? With heart rate. And that's the question that often people have is well, what's better, power or heart rate? I mean, if I had to choose one over the other, I think if I had to choose, I think I would choose heart rate.
Yeah.
Because heart rate is telling me what's going on under the hood. Like it's telling me my physiology.
Yeah.
And then, fortunately I don't have to choose, but how about you if you had to choose?
Well, I mean, heart rate translates to other sports. And so, although we will talk about running power meters, and I was out testing another force measuring device for swimming, which will ultimately tell us power for swimming. And so we'll get that number at some point as well. I don't know, I guess there's a third one, and that's RPE.
Yeah.
Rating of perceived exertion. So there is some.
And I think RPE is a powerful tool.
And I think you're right, and I think these have to be used in combination.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's what's advanced. A lot of our training understanding is how to use all three of those together, because it is important to know, the subjective rating of how hard you feel the exercise is, and then the physiological measure of heart rate, and then the mechanical measure of physiology, being power. And you really got to combine those three.
No, it's so true. And you know, the funny thing is once you really get in depth and understand how other things influence this.
Mm-hmm.
So if I train, for example, fasted versus fueled,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be awesome to actually have two different power duration curves. One if I was fasted, one if I was fueled, right? Same with heart rate. You know, heart rate is going to change fasted versus fueled. Elevation plays a huge role,
Yeah.
right? So the higher you go up in elevation, the higher your heart rate's going to go, but the lower your power is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so understanding that, like if you're going to go, let's say you're going to go do a race in Boulder, and saying, you know, you're training in Las Vegas. Well, you know, my power numbers say I should hit 220 watts for that race.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, now understand you've gained 2,500 feet from here to there. So understanding physiologically what is going to happen to you, you know, are you acclimatized to the, you know, to that altitude or not?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where these pieces come in. And then I love it with that because then I can utilize heart rate more, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, because it's how hard I'm working.
Yeah.
And even there's so many little pieces to this. The one that I've just learned about that is interesting, and I honestly haven't read enough about it, is even barometric pressure
Mm-hmm.
can have an influence on these things. And yeah, it's pretty cool, like the amount of information that we're starting to gain and starting to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's now, okay, so let's talk about, oh, I guess there's a couple different ways we can go, but you want to go faster.
Yep.
So you are talking about how to train to improve your power. But then I guess on the flip side is you could go faster by having better gear or reducing any resistance to moving forward.
And that's huge, right? Power, you showed the equation last time.
Yeah.
Power is only part of the equation. Drag and resistance is, in my opinion, just as important.
Hmm. So
You know.
when you do a ride like you did today,
Yep.
and you're looking at, okay, you have an idea of 240 as a number you want to hit. When you put that number down, are you thinking of the gear that you're also using, or do you account for that, or
You know, I don't, but if I was, for example, going to be on my time trial bike, like
mhm,
let's say I was just going to go out and hit 80 miles on the time trial bike,
no,
I would probably have a different number today.
okay,
But you know, I was out of town for 4 weeks with just my road bike, and
no,
so now my body is more used to that.
mhm,
This summer, I went away for 10 weeks with just my time trial bike,
mm,
and my body was used to that. So I think it's a lot what your body is used to. Like realistically, what I'd like to have is two power duration curves, right? One for in the time trial position,
mhm,
one for on the road bike.
mm,
But I can tell you, like before I was to race and set like a wattage that I was going to race at, I would do testing on that bike in that position that I was going to race at.
okay,
So this is an interesting one because, like, think about it. You know, my first race of the year is going to be in St. George, as far as like a high level race. Well, now I got to start to calculate how much time am I in aero
yeah,
versus sitting up, because there's a lot of climbing in that course,
I know. It's
right?
so do you start looking at in a race like that which bike to take?
I wouldn't, because I think that the aero is just so much more important.
Hmm.
But you know, let's say I was going to do the Alpe d'Huez triathlon,
Yeah, yeah,
which is a pretty famous triathlon that you climb up Alpe d'Huez, and I think there's 2 or 3 passes, mountain passes in it, or something
hmm, hmm,
crazy like that. Then I would really start to consider, you know, the road bike instead.
yeah,
It's significantly lighter,
hmm.
and the position for climbing is better, right?
Yeah, I think people are always surprised at how heavy even my time trial bike is. They're like, "Wow, why is that heavy?" And it's like, "Well, because you're usually not using this for a real hilly course
Yeah.
because it's not designed for
But the advantage of the time trial bike, in my opinion, is for every race you do, almost every race you do almost the same amount of up as down.
Mm-hmm.
And a time trial bike on the down is
Mm-hmm.
significantly faster.
Yeah.
The position is just so much. It's just so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really, you lose some on the climb, but I think you make up more on the flats
Mm-hmm.
and on the downhills. You know, it's St. George, it's a net downhill course. A lot of people don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's even a more reason. Now, if it was a net uphill, let's say it gained 1,000 feet, well, then the conversation might be different.
Oh, right.
But I think it loses like 400 or 500 feet, like net.
Yeah.
And and these are all like getting pretty intricate.
Mm-hmm.
But even for me at St. George, I know this is getting a little bit off topic, but I'll run a disc wheel.
Yeah, right. I think I think a lot of people have finally come to that conclusion too, that unless you're really doing a hilly, real big climb, still use the disc wheel.
Yeah. So John, let's talk about power and heart rate and using them together.
Mm-hmm.
I know we only got like maybe 10 minutes left, but I think that's also really important and super powerful. So we were kind of making talking about which we'd rather. Well, both of us have both.
I should have had that file open. Let me open up
Okay.
this set that has both power and heart rate. So give me a second, but I'll speak to it and then bring it up. So in a graded exercise test, which is a test where you start off at a real light intensity, and then you increase the intensity at graded intervals. And so it's very controlled. Your heart rate and your power will increase at very similar rates. All right.
And just to clarify for people that, I think Zwift and Ruby, they call it, and Trainer Road, they call it a ramp test.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's the same principle. It just, continually gets harder and harder and harder.
Mm-hmm. All right. Almost there. Fitness assessment. All right, let me share. Hopefully this doesn't mess it up. All right, so Excel should be opening up. I'll just pull up some data that we did before, and we were trying some different RAM tests, and we were measuring oxygen cost. We were measuring heart rate. We were measuring power, and lactate. That's not it.
No, that's an order. I think it's the one above that.
Oh, that's an order. Okay, so yeah, this one might have it. That's some different power meters. All right, this is not the one I'm thinking of, but this one is still because you've mentioned lactate before.
Oh yeah, this was the lactate test, not the.
Yeah, this is the lactate work that we're doing. So here's power on the x-axis. This is heart rate on the y-axis. So this works. Let me. It starts down here at resting, but I'll just delete this just to make the graph look a little better. All right, so that is, I guess this works. My computer is super slow. So here's power, here's heart rate, measuring both at the same time, doing this RAM test. Power increases across the RAM test, so it got up to about 300 watts. And heart rate increases. This line is a straight line, and if we add in a R squared, which tells us how straight that line is, in essence.
It's pretty straight.
High. And a 1 means for every increase in power, I would see the same relative increase in heart rate. All right. And 0.982 is super close to 1. So heart rate and power are linked. And that's why, we keep coming back to the power tells our physiology. That's what the power is telling us. And heart rate, most importantly, is if I put VO2 down here, rate of oxygen consumption, heart rate is correlated with VO2. And yeah, we weren't doing VO2 for this test. And so I have another data set with VO2 over here. Let's see if I can.
And John, as you find this, I think it's also important to understand that this is in a lab, and this is a one-shot deal.
Yeah.
Right. So there's, as I was trying to allude to earlier, there are many factors that influence heart rate.
Yeah.
Right. And there are some factors that influence power, but I think there's more that influence heart rate, in particular in a lab setting.
Mm-hmm.
So, a few I'll throw out: temperature, humidity, altitude, fed state, sleep the night before, overall stress level, recovery from previous trainings, hydration, medications. There are lots of things that will and there's probably more than I mentioned that will affect this. But you're right. On any given one-day test, these will go. They will be very similar and linear.
Yep. No, that's right. And you're right. It's a ramp test. It's very controlled. And the whole idea of it being controlled is that you're trying to really distinguish between the energy systems. Whereas if you fluctuate the stages too much, well, that may tap one energy system over another, and it will throw off the meaningfulness of the test itself.
Yeah.
And so here's VO2, and the blue line is power, and the x-axis is time. So now this is the ramp test. So power was this, and then it was this, then it was this. Very systematic increase in power, both in magnitude as well as in duration. And you can see how VO2 follows right along with that. And heart rate, heart rate is, where is my heart rate data? It says it's here, but I don't see it. But heart rate will follow right along with this line as well. I have somehow a hidden heart rate. So power increases, heart rate increases, heart rate's related to VO2. And VO2 is what we really want to understand in terms of converting chemical energy to mechanical energy. Okay, so here's heart rate down here. And the red is VO2. Those increase both at really similar rates. And then here's power. So they're all increasing in a very similar fashion. Yes, there's detail.
Isn't that VCO2, the green?
That is the VCO. Yep, thanks. I'm still missing heart rate here.
Yeah, that's weird.
VO2 and power, again, a very linear relationship between these two, which is similar to what we saw with heart rate, 0.98. And we're really trying to get to understanding VO2, because VO2 tells us aerobically how fast we're transforming chemical energy to mechanical energy.
Yeah. And this works really well, and they're very linear, but the key here is this is a ramp test.
Yep.
And this is not real life.
Mm-hmm.
And this maybe the last thing we'll talk about is in for tonight is in real life, where we have surges and we have hills and we have ups and downs. Heart rate is a lagging indicator. So we could do this right now. Like I could get on my trainer right now and I could go 30 seconds at 300 watts. I actually couldn't do it right now. My legs are a little sore, but 30 seconds at 300 watts and my heart rate wouldn't probably get to 120.
Right.
Right. Because it takes time for the heart basically to speed up or get up to speed. And then it also, if I stop the power, so I go to 0, my heart rate doesn't go to 0, it slowly recovers. And actually, when you get into some awesome coaching and physiology and understanding this, those are really good metrics you could utilize too. Is how fast your heart responds, and how fast it recovers.
That's right.
And the more fit people, they respond quick and they will recover quick.
Yep.
And we can really, when you really get into this, and you can take deep dives in this stuff, but those are also important things.
That's right, because that tells you how much oxygen you're consuming after exercise, and that EPOC, that excess post-exercise amount of VO2, which is really a neat. And I know we've talked about that before. Maybe we need to circle back to that sometime.
Yeah, it's a really good indicator, right, of your fitness. And so ultimately, if you're doing, for example, you're doing intervals, let's say you're doing 3-minute intervals, or because let's say 2, because you're looking at your VO2. So you're looking at increasing VO2. And the tricky part about VO2 and increasing it is basically getting you to the point where your heart is very close to its maximum level. It obviously wouldn't be at its max, but getting it very close to its maximum level. If you're going 3 minutes, or let's say 2 minutes, and then you'd, let's say, take, I don't know, too long of a break, and 2 minutes again, too long of a break, 2 minutes. So your heart rate will never get to VO2, right? Because in that 2 minutes, it's not long enough to get, or sorry, I should be saying VO2 max, or a percentage of VO2 max. And so, but if you figure it out where you actually have the power that you're ultimately looking at, and you're going to hit this wattage and then have this amount of recovery at this wattage, this amount of recovery, this wattage, you can almost guarantee you'll get to where you are and now this is in a prescribed manner. Now you could do this with heart rate as well, right? I could go, and I could figure it out as I was going with my heart rate, but it's a little bit more of a challenge because there's, day-to-day variability is pretty high on that. Right.
Well, I love this. I am motivated to do a bit of this on my ride tomorrow. I was just looking at my calendar, and I've got Ironman Coeur d'Alene coming up.
Yep.
And let me see where. I got Oceanside in 11 weeks, but I don't think Oceanside is going to happen. So I've got 23 weeks to Coeur d'Alene. So I am going to, I love this because this is motivating me to get out and really pay attention to my power meter on my ride tomorrow.
Yep. Also, then what's your plan?
Well, I've got a couple of sections that I know I want to work harder than I normally would. And I'm going to look at my last couple of rides on this section and look at the power I was doing, and I want to try to go above that. So,
Actually, let's add I keep saying one last thing. The one last other thing that I love about power is it doesn't matter how windy it is. It doesn't matter if you're uphill. It doesn't matter if you're downhill.
Right.
It is what it is. And so that's why it's such a good thing. Like, let's say you're going to do a Strava segment tomorrow, right? You could be 20, 30% faster if you get a tailwind, right? Or it's cooler or whatever the case may be, but the power is the power. Right? If you say, last time you did it at 250 watts, this time you did it at 256 watts, you improved, even though the time may not be an improvement. And I think oftentimes we get caught up in the time, right? Well, how fast did you get up that climb? Okay, well, that's nice, and it's a good metric to look at it. But the individual power is important, and we have not even touched this. But really, what's more important is watts per kilogram.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a little teaser for something we'll talk about down the road.
Yeah, that'll be good. All right, so what do you got this weekend?
Oh man, I destroyed my legs today, so we'll see. I got to get my classes ready.
Yeah.
I'll swim tomorrow for sure. And there will be one more probably good bike ride and good run because since we have a little bit of a long weekend.
That's
How
good.
about you? You got your segments tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a ride tomorrow. I'll do a longer ride Sunday. 23 weeks away from Coeur d'Alene, so that's a good amount of time to start building up. And yeah, I am going to try to install my floor for the trailer tomorrow. That's the big deal.
All right. Well, good luck.
My adhesive says 65 or higher.
Well, it's supposed to be that tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, but for like 72 hours, it has to be.
Oh, it has to be that for 72 hours. Oh, yeah, that.
So, but what I did is I wrapped the trailer up in some tarps, and I've got some halogen lights ready to go.
Okay.
I'll heat it internally as well, and I think I'll be all right.
Cool. All right. Well, enjoy that and have a great weekend.
All right. Well, have a good weekend. Be safe. Train hard.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.